Welcome to episode 120 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. Today's Behavioral Economics Foundations episode is about pre-commitment. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Today, we're talking about pre-commitment and how it can be used in life and business. As far as concepts go, I'm guessing this is one of those you've heard of and think you know everything about. So, I'm going to challenge that belief and hopefully teach you some new insights and ways to use pre-commitment on today's show. Pre-commitment is very closely related to time discounting, as well as loss aversion, habits, and several other concepts that will be linked for you in the show notes, which can be found within the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/120. As a side note, can I just say that I can hardly believe we've made it to 120 episodes of the podcast already? And there's another very exciting milestone that's going to be hitting as this episode comes out. I'm not sure exactly when. It's either going to be on October 1st or October 2nd, but sometime really within the recording and the release of the episode is going to be a big, exciting number. For a walk down memory lane, the Brainy Business Podcast launched in July 2018. November 1st, 2019, 483 days later, we hit 100,000 downloads. In the following 11 months, what I'm guessing is going to be 336 days, on October 2nd, we will hit 250,000 downloads. 250,000, you guys, from 160 countries around the world, 120 episodes downloaded 250,000 times. It's a pretty exciting milestone, and I am taking the time to properly celebrate here at Worldwide Headquarters. Thank you all for downloading, subscribing, sharing, for the 5-star reviews, and for taking the time to reach out and tell me your stories. I love it all, and I really appreciate you. And pre-commitment is a big reason this has all been made possible, because of my pre-commitment to have new episodes every single Friday, no matter what. A pre-commitment I made to the void when launching the show. We always have new content coming out on those days. In 120 episodes, I've never missed, and I hope I never will. When starting the Brainy Business, I made a commitment to do a weekly show for 1 full year before evaluating if it was a fit for my business or a waste of time. Before launching, who knew how it would turn out? I am so thankful to say it was clearly worth its weight in time gold far before hitting that 1-year mark, and the Brainy Business is here to stay. Thank you again, and it seems very fitting that today's episode on pre-commitment is marking this exciting 250,000 milestone. For those of you on the Brainy Business email list, you may have noticed a formatting change in the last week. I'm trying out a new approach. It's pretty much text only, with a listen, a read, a share, and an On Melina's Mind section. Listen has the new podcast episode and a tiny bit of what it's about, much less than what I've had in past newsletters. Then there's a little bit about an article I've written, either new content from that week or possibly a past article that's really closely related to expand on that topic at hand, which I believe you'll find most valuable in that moment. Share is an opportunity to showcase some of what I read that week, content I found helpful from others, which I thought you might like as well. And then a little in the On My Mind section is just that, the concepts that have been floating around for me that week, or possibly a common question I've been receiving or an idea I'm contemplating. Who knows? I want to leave it open and see where the format takes us for the next 250,000 or so downloads. If there's something you would like to see in that newsletter, please do reply to it and let me know. I'm always open for feedback. And for everyone who is not yet on the list, simply download the freebie worksheet for this episode, which you can find at thebrainybusiness.com/120. Everyone in the States can also text the word Brainy, Brainy, to 33777. Once you send that text or download that first freebie, you get access to the super secret subscribers page with more than 50 freebies and more all the time as a thank you. All right, let's dig in on pre-commitment. Because we humans, and some animals as well, don't always choose what's best for us, and we can be tempted by treats and wins now at the expense of our future selves, that's time discounting and other biases at play, we will often put barriers in our way to make it so we'll prevent ourselves from choosing something we might not be able to control in the moment, even though we know it isn't in our best interest. We behave differently when in a cold state, when our logical brain can think clearly and isn't overwhelmed by temptation in front of the more excitable subconscious. So we can set up those barriers to prevent ourselves from being wooed by the subconscious when it's in the hot state, and so we don't fall into those traps. That is where pre-commitment comes into play. Pre-commitments can be external, like throwing all the junk food out of the house or dumping soda down the drain. They can also be internal, like a promise to yourself that you will not break, like my commitment to have episodes of the podcast come out every Friday. Especially at the beginning, no one was sitting on the edge of their seat ready to hit download the moment an episode came out. That was all a promise to myself in hopes that eventually it might get to be something other people counted on as well. And these pre-commitments can also be a bit of a mix. So the moment I declared this will come out every Friday and I will never miss to the audience, you've become part of my pre-commitment device. So when I feel tired or distracted or get sick or whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't get to just skip a week because I've made a commitment, and I'm not the type of person who has an inconsistent podcast. To miss an episode would be very difficult for my brain to handle due to something called cognitive dissonance. We aren't going to get into this too much on the show today, as it will have its own episode soon, but cognitive dissonance is essentially the discomfort we feel when our perception of ourselves doesn't line up with our actions. Humans don't like to have these things out of alignment, and when there's ever anything off, we tend to very quickly write a story to explain why it's okay. This is a big piece of how fundamental attribution error can feel like it's working in our favor, but can actually be problematic. Let's say I did miss an episode. As someone who believes I'm the type of person who honors their commitments and would never miss, something I've said a lot, how could I cope with this sharp sting of reality staring me in the face? Would I take a good hard look at myself and say, well, I guess I'm not that type of person. I guess I'm the type of person who lets others down. Or would I be more likely to write it off as a fluke, a coincidence, to say, well, if only X, Y, or Z wouldn't have happened, it would have gotten out on time. This isn't about me because I'm not the type of person who misses this deadline. It's probably because our brains do this surprisingly quickly, write off a story that doesn't align with how we want to see ourselves. As another example, I believe myself to be the kind of person who appreciates other people's time, who respects them and honors my commitments. But as you learned about in the episode about planning fallacy recently, I'm also really bad at wanting to do that one more thing before starting the next thing. It's my nature to think I can answer this one email before jumping on that Zoom call or running out the door, and that can make me a minute late instead of a minute early. That creates some cognitive dissonance for me, and for a long time, I did the easy, natural thing. Writing it off and saying things like, but I have so many emails, they must know I have other meetings. When could I answer them if I don't do it now? And all the other good stuff that my brain is going to be creating for me instead of admitting that it's a trend. I can look back at my past behavior and say that I was a minute or two late every single day, at least once a day, usually more for a really, really, really long time, perpetually just a little bit behind. Now comes the choice. Do I accept that this is the person I am and know that I will fall victim to these temptations, so other people just have to accept it? Thankfully, no. Instead, I can establish some pre-commitment tactics while in a cold state to help set me up for success when that moment of weakness comes. I could set all my clocks to be a few minutes fast. I can only allow myself to check emails or do other miscellaneous tasks at a certain time of day once I'm done with calls. I can set my meetings to have a buffer of at least 5 minutes to allow for proper transition between them. I can use my time timer and have it set for 5 minutes before that time to help wrap it up 5 minutes in advance to actually have the buffer between meetings. I can have a plan and agenda for each meeting and be more firm with myself, saying, I do not let meetings run long. And if it looks like one is going to run long, instead of letting it happen, pre-schedule a follow-up time before we hit that time limit that we've set in advance. I could have my husband watch my calendar and stand outside my office door to listen if I actually get off the phone when I am supposed to, and have some sort of fine that I have to pay to the house fund or a penalty chore I have to do as a punishment if I don't keep my commitment. In a really extreme case, I could set up my phone to shut down at a set time and end calls, or not pay for Zoom so it has the 40-minute call time limit no matter what and just kicks you out whether you're mid-sentence or not. You get the idea, right? The thing to know is there are lots of ways to help keep yourself committed, and understanding what's happening in your brain can help you do better if you've struggled with this in the past. And if you're a human, I can pretty much guarantee you've had this come up at least once, because we all do it. It's a natural thing. But the thing about pre-commitment is, while it does help us stick to the right stuff, what we really want to do, what we know is good for us more than if we just wing it, because of that cognitive dissonance problem, we can also be really good at ignoring our own best intentions so that it doesn't always work. If you aren't ready to face a real problem, to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I am actually one of those people I have vowed to never be. I've pretended that I'm punctual and that other people's time matters to me more than my own, but in the heat of the moment, I often make the wrong choice and show up late, even if it's only a minute. It isn't okay. I accept that I have done this in the past, that this has been in my nature, and there's no explanation that will make it okay for me. There's no reason I will accept to say this is acceptable in the future. I will not do this anymore. And I will not explain it away. This is the most important thing I can do for my personal brand, keeping my commitments and showing up when I say I will. So this will be my focus now. That was a hard thing to say. It was hard to write it out, and it's hard to read it to you now. It stings a little. It feels very raw and scary. And that's how it's supposed to feel. I need to own that past to have a better future. If I don't, if I let the distaste for cognitive dissonance explain it away, it'll never change. I will never change. And no amount of pre-commitment tricks will do it for me. Owning the past and accepting it allows me to decide it needs to be fixed, because I'm not willing to do that to people anymore. Then I can take a hard look at what changes. It's likely a mix of pre-commitment devices can help me keep those commitments. Yes, the minute late to the meeting is a problem, but it's part of a bigger system of errors I've been explaining away over time. Scheduling meetings without buffers, saying yes to too many things, not investing in systems or setting up processes that would allow people to help me. As with pretty much every applied behavioral science project I've ever looked at or worked on or talked about with somebody, there's always a bigger problem at the root than what you think is going on at the surface. And it's important to take a step back and make sure you're addressing the whole thing when you put your pre-commitment devices in place. Asking great questions like, why do I feel the need to respond to this email right now? Or what's the consequence of waiting? How valued would this person feel if I gave them my undivided attention instead of splitting it between multiple things? How is not ending this meeting on time actually being disrespectful to the person I'm talking to, breaking a promise to them, and the person who's waiting on the other side, whether it's my next meeting or a 7-year-old ready for his favorite grilled cheese? Once the motivation is clear, it's easier to find a pre-commitment device or series of them that will work to help you overcome the problem. I could have conversations with others to help keep me in line and may even come up with some more extreme tactics like the penalties enforced by my husband, or because he's really busy too and it isn't his job to sit outside my door, I can just promise to be honest about it and live up to that, which is possible when you aren't trying to fix 25 things at once. Back to the advice I've given on goal setting and mindset work over the years, you just can't have too many things you're working on at one time because then you have an excuse to not do any of them. You can just do surface level stuff on 10 of them and never make any real progress. Finding the most important thing to work on and dedicating all your willpower to that one thing is much more likely to succeed. And you can be honest about what may be allowed to slide to help accommodate that in the beginning phases or forever. In my case, it might be the badge of being busy and having a lot going on. I need to accept that having sanity and space in my day is a good thing and doesn't mean I'm not accomplishing things. Often it's quite the opposite. As I experience it, the pre-commitment devices will work even better then because they're getting results and helping me achieve the cognitive alignment my brain craves without having to tell myself white lies to make it fit. I really am becoming the person I want to be. Depending on the goal you choose to use your pre-commitment tactics to help with, there are some really cool apps and ideas that can help you get there. The first one is called Stick, and that's STICKK. I've talked about this on the show before. It's crafted by behavioral economists to help you stick to your goals. Say you need to write your book or release podcast episodes every week or go live on your social media every day, exercise daily, whatever. You can set up a commitment for yourself and say that for a period of time, you're going to stick with it no matter what. You set it up in the cold state and may say, I'm going to walk every day, rain or shine, for 90 days for a minimum of 30 minutes a day. And if I ever miss, then a donation of $500 will be made to a cause I hate. So say if you're a Democrat, the money goes to a Republican candidate. Or if you're an animal rights activist, the money goes to a hunting organization. Whatever is the thing that you can't stand the idea of giving a donation to, that's the right thing for you, because it will help you keep that pre-commitment when you're feeling lazy or it's raining or whatever. And because it's automatic and uses the GPS on your phone so you can't fake it, you know that if you don't get your 30 minutes in by midnight, it will auto-transfer and you can't stop it. Then can you wait a half hour to watch that next episode on Netflix? With motivation like this, it's a lot easier to stick to. The next app is called Forest. This one can be used if you want to be more productive and especially if you have a hard time not getting distracted by your phone. So, if you should be writing but always feel tempted to pick up the phone to scroll through Instagram, consider this one. Forest gives you the opportunity to create a virtual forest. And each time you have a task you need to commit to, you choose and plant a virtual seed. Let's say you decide to write for 45 minutes. You choose your tree and the spot in your forest and begin to work. It is growing as you work and you can see it getting more lush. But if you pick up your phone and leave the app before the 45 minutes are up, it dies. You watch your new virtual tree, your baby, shrivel and die. Killing a tree, even a virtual one, feels bad to the brain and can help you keep your commitments. Plus, Forest has a plan where you can redeem the coins and they plant real trees. It's pretty cool. There are, of course, links to both Forest and Stick in the show notes at thebrainybusiness.com/120 if you want to check that out. And also, in a few weeks, you're going to get to hear an interview with Aline Holsworth, head of behavioral science at Pattern Health and a principal at the Center for Advanced Hindsight. She and the teams have done some really cool things using a virtual pet to help people keep their commitments, and have also tried out some interesting stuff, like if you don't take your medications as prescribed, it will send a text to your mom. If you don't want the bugging you reminder from mom, you may be more motivated to keep your commitment to take your medication all by yourself without having the app send her a message and dealing with that whole thing. Other pre-commitment tricks include getting people to sign a document up front instead of at the end when it's too late. If you want to nudge behavior to ensure someone will fill out a form honestly, let's say, asking them to sign and agree that everything I've written here is correct has likely already been justified in their brain if it was slightly in that cognitive dissonance space. So they'll feel good about signing it even if they weren't exactly honest when they filled out the form. If instead you ask them to sign an honesty pledge up front before they complete the document, studies have shown that they'll be more likely to hold to that, using cognitive dissonance as an advantage than if they were to just sign at the end. This is also why it's important to be specific with your asks and to get appointments on the calendar as soon as possible. When Nikki Rausch was on the show, we talked about making it easy to do business with you and scheduling your circle back calls in the moment someone is interested. Making that pre-commitment is so much more effective in continuing conversations and moving forward in a sales process. If someone says they want to talk about working together, instead of saying, "Great, here's my card, send me an email when you're ready," or "Can I have your card and I'll follow up next week?" Get the appointment on the calendar in that moment. It's a pre-commitment that's a lot harder to push off than a theoretical conversation that may happen someday. If someone's expecting your call, they already said that it was okay for you to call them, they're much more likely to pick up the phone, to keep the appointment, to have even a small part of the conversation. Whereas if you're just going to email them, they might never respond. You may never get that moment on the phone. As another example, if you want your team to work on a project and you want them to get it to you at a certain time, don't say, "If you can get that done as soon as possible, that would be great." Because that can be anytime. There's no urgency or commitment in place. Instead, if you say, "I'm hoping to review this first thing when I come in Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Will you have it in my inbox before then?" When they say yes, they've made a commitment to have it for you, and they'll be much more likely to keep it, especially when you didn't set any sort of expectation in the as soon as possible scenario where nobody really knows when you want it. Again, you can't ask for everything tomorrow morning, and if someone asks you to do something that's going to be impossible to complete with what you have already on your calendar, it's important to gently push back and acknowledge if it can't be done. Set the expectations up front to help everyone be on the same page and comfortable with the commitment. For example, let's say I asked an employee to have something for me by Thursday at 8. If they respond to me by saying, "With the other priorities we've discussed for this week, that's going to be difficult to meet. Is there something on the project list that can have its deadline moved back to accommodate for this?" That would force me to look at the list of projects and prioritize for the team member instead of them having to guess, which almost never works out the way that you want, and can help reset my expectations. Or maybe I'm going to ask someone else to do it. Maybe I'm going to move a different project to someone else. Maybe I need to move another deadline back. Maybe there's something they thought they needed to work on that's really not that important. It's just an opportunity to realign. You get some good communication and helps everyone to honor their commitments and keep moving forward on that same team. All right. I want to close out this episode with one of my favorite pre-commitment tactics, the loss aversion jar. You heard me talk about this when I first came up with it on episode 9 and a few others, maybe in a presentation or two, because, I just love it so much. Here's how this pre-commitment piece works. Let's say you want to buy a new computer or sign up for a program you're excited about or finally stick to that weight loss plan, finish your book, whatever. You need to set up a date for when it will be done, for how long you're going to be on this commitment track, as well as a budget for what you're going to have at the end. So if the item at the end is a new computer and you need about $2,000 for it, then say you set your goal for 6 months out and you decide that you're also going to put this in tandem with writing that book or working on articles or whatever it happens to be. And so you say you're going to write for 30 minutes every day. And for every day that you do, $10 goes in the jar. It's going to be a clear jar you can have in plain view of where you work. So it's a priming reminder as well. Every day you put money in the jar, and at the end of 6 months, when the book is complete, you have all the money for your new computer. And, the book is done, so win-win. Of course, much like stick, if you ever miss, then all the money in the jar goes away and you have to start all over again. It's not that you just don't get to put in $10 that day, you lose it all. And you can choose to have these lost funds do anything, but to help you keep the commitment, having it be something you don't like the idea of is best. So you don't want to say, well, that just goes back in the checking account, I guess, because there isn't really a negative there to keep you motivated. Maybe it's the donation to the thing you don't like, or it could be something that's still useful to you, but not what you really want the money for. Like it could be an extra mortgage or a car payment so it doesn't completely go to waste, but you also have to lose out on that ability to buy the computer that you still really need. And accepting that until you stick to your full plan, you can't buy the computer. In the case of the diet and exercise plan, you could set it up that for every day you do what you said you would, the $10 goes in the jar, and at the end of 6 months, you get to use that money on new, smaller clothes. Awesome. Seeing the money in the jar and knowing it all goes away if you miss can help you snowball and stick to that goal, especially if you have a buddy who you know will hold you to it. When I know my husband won't let me slide or argue it away, that there isn't an excuse that makes it okay to miss my pre-commitment, it changes the level of motivation. Don't choose someone who's going to bend at your will and believe the story your brain tells for why it won't happen again or it wasn't your fault or whatever, because, as we already talked about, you're only picking one thing to focus on and it needs to be something really important to you. It needs to be worth the time, worth the effort and sacrifice, and then the pre-commitment devices you set up will help propel you forward and jump past the parts where you might have fallen off the wagon before. You can celebrate your wins and achieve those goals by using pre-commitment in a responsible way. Putting all these tools toward one single goal, one thing that matters, will help you ensure that those pre-commitment tactics and everything else is going to help you stay on track, achieve those goals, and then you can really celebrate your wins with the buddy that's helping you stick to them and someone that you know would have done the extreme thing if you messed up. So if you don't have that holding you to it, if you don't have that person in your life that can do it, instead of the loss aversion jar, you would want to look for something like stick, where it's going to transfer whether you like to or not. And it's a cold, unfeeling computer. So it's going to happen if you don't meet the goal. Understanding that if you can't commit to having the extreme bad thing be the consequence, if you don't meet the goal, if you don't do what you said you were going to do, if you don't keep those commitments, then you're just not going to do them at all. And you need to pick something else or ask yourself why you don't feel comfortable with that and what other changes may need to be made. Going back to that question of identifying the most important thing to be working on and finding the bigger problem, the most important thing. If you're not ready to commit to it, don't work on it right now and maybe find something else that you can work on to help you build that snowball, to get a couple of small wins. And if you know that 90 days is too long, you can start with 10 or 5 or whatever it is, just something so that you can see that you can do it. When you focus, set your intentions on something and know that you're just not going to give up and it won't be acceptable and it's that one thing, it really truly can make a difference. So I'm asking you now, what will your goal be? And when will you achieve it? Make the commitment by sharing it with me on social media. That's a nice pre-commitment device for you. You can find me on all the socials as the Brainy Biz, B-I-Z. And if you aren't already following me, there are links for you to go there directly within the show notes, which also have all those great links to articles and studies on pre-commitments, as well as links to related past episodes, including loss aversion, fundamental attribution error, time discounting, how to finally change your behavior, last week's interview with Beck Weeks about the Peak app, how to get and stay motivated, and more. That's all waiting for you, along with your free worksheet with tips for using pre-commitment as a tool that works for you at thebrainybusiness.com/120. And before we go, may I ask you for a small favor to help celebrate the 250,000 milestone? If you're a fan of the Brainy Business, whether this is your first episode with us or you've been here for all 120, would you consider rating and leaving a review? Those can be done right in the app you're listening to. For example, in Apple Podcasts, the option to leave up to 5 stars is right there next to the subscribe button. And hopefully you've done that already as well. Once you leave your star rating, and I do hope you feel 5 stars is appropriate, you have the option to write a review, which would be great if you have a moment to leave a few words. It helps others like you to find the show and know it will be a fit for them, and helps the show come up higher in the rankings so more people can find it as well. And thank you to Dawn Burke in the US, Harmony Berry in Spain, and VK Levine in the US, and everyone else for your wonderful 5-star reviews. They all make my day, and if I'm being honest, my week. I really appreciate you. If you listen on a player that doesn't allow for reviews, consider popping over to Facebook or LinkedIn. Any rating and review is greatly appreciated by me, so thank you in advance for taking the time to provide that feedback for me and future listeners of the Brainy Business. I appreciate you. Thank you for these 250,000 downloads, for listening, for subscribing, rating, and leaving reviews of the Brainy Business. And just like that, episode 120 on pre-commitment is done. Next week, on episode 121, I am so excited to have 4 of the founding members of the brand new, totally awesome Global Association of Applied Behavioral Scientists, lovingly referred to as GABS, joining me on the show to talk about this amazing new group. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Molina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.